Welcome to the What's Your Truth podcast, the show that not only showcases the best of independent artists, but also explores what inspires them, what drives them, and what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. With me on the show today is Jon Moody. Now, it's not every day that you come across a guy who can throw down on bass the way that Jon can, and moreover, turn the bass into the focal instrument of a project is typically relegated to the gods and only rarely ever witnessed in this realm. And yet, Jon does just this. He has 6 solo albums released so far, and the sonic range and songwriting depth encompassed by these masterpieces is nothing short of supernatural. Hitting on genres including punk, blues, jazz, and funk, among others, Jon pulls sound out of a bass that I'm pretty sure scientists have yet to fathom. Jon is also one quarter of Michigan-based punk rock band Quirk, which harnesses the spirit and grittiness of 90s grunge bands as well as the ska era and combines these with playfulness and empowering lyrics. And his wife also happens to be the drummer for this band, which I think is just plain cool. Another fun fact, when Jon is not busy being the Superman of guitars, his Clark Kent disguise extraordinaire is as a marketing and artist rep for GHS Strings. This is actually the capacity in which I originally met Jon, one fateful NAMM, just as the world was approaching a 3-year oblivion. It was that 2020 NAMM actually right before COVID. That was when we met.
Yeah.
And in the course of the last few years, aside from working together through our relationship via GHS, Jon and I also collaborated on a crazy jazz metal instrumental track titled Carousel. And boy, oh boy, the licks he threw down truly took that song from being an okay piece to a sonic behemoth, and I can't help but smile every time I listen to it. All these things aside, Jon is just one of the coolest people on the planet, a joy to work with, a fountain of knowledge and inspiration on all things music, and an incredible friend. It's my pleasure to have him on the show, ladies and gentlemen, Jon Moody.
Wow. Thank you. I hope I live up to that introduction.
I have faith. I think you're going to do just fine.
All right.
So let's roll into it, shall we?
Sure.
Amazing. So, Jon, my first question for you is, how did you decide you wanted to become a musician?
I actually came from a very musical background. My mom is a retired education musician. So she taught elementary music for all the years that I knew her. She even did choir for middle school and high school stuff, played piano for like the city choir and things like that. And also, she was a string bass player up until I was born. So we always joked around that the reason I gravitated towards bass was because when she was playing string bass in the community group when she was pregnant with me, the double bass is a huge instrument that rests against your body and you feel those vibrations and everything. And so we kind of joked that I was receiving all these bass vibrations in utero. So it just kind of made it natural that when I had a chance to move towards the bass, that's where I went.
That's so awesome. And that's funny because my next question was literally going to be, what was the first experience you remember having with music? So I don't know. I guess that's a memory question. I don't know if you remember that, but what is
I
the
mean,
thing you
I
remember?
think, yeah, I like my biggest music ones that I remember always were like sitting around at home in front of the component stereo, which most people nowadays are just like, oh man. Um, but listening to what we considered light rock, but it was like, listening to the Moody Blues, to the Cars, Air Supply, and stuff like that, which back then people were like, oh man, those bands suck. But you're listening to them now, you're like, those guys were great. Like they were just phenomenal.
Yeah, and not just the musicality, but the songwriting. Oh my God, like the Cars, come on. Are you kidding?
Right. I mean, and the thing is too, it's like, especially there's so much power in just like changing little phrases of the word, like best friend's girl. You're talking about this thing that guy's talking about whole thing, she's my best friend's girl. You're like, okay, cool. And then that last tag, and she used to be mine, totally changes the entire song.
100%. Yeah, totally. No, those guys were brilliant, man. And boy, rest in peace, Rick Ocasek, man. That
Yeah.
sucked.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So who are the biggest influences on your work and why?
Um, I would say starting off because I was in a classical jazz realm. My big ones there were like Slam Stewart, which was like the 30s, 40s, very beginner jazz kind of thing when jazz was still moving into what it was. And then like Charles Mingus. And I think most of it is because both those people were very you could tell who they were by listening to him like play a couple of notes. It was very, it was night and day. Okay, yeah, that's them. And the thing too is that they never, like, when they were playing their part in the band, as a bass player, it was nothing but support. It was creating that foundation for everything else to lay on, so we could do it. But then when it was time for them to solo, that's when they would really kind of shine. You'd be like, oh man, that's great, and you're listening to them do all this crazy stuff. Then when their solo's done, back to just, straight walking or stuff like that, going into traditional stuff. And I think then in the electric bass realm, my first one honestly was Cliff Williams of AC/DC.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's funny because growing up in a jazz thing and stuff, and then really liking this band that, by that standards, is very elementary. But you think of it, it's like Malcolm Young and Cliff Williams, the best rhythm section ever. Like the engine was just solid, and you're hearing Cliff just like drive the bus playing eighth notes and quarter notes, and it's just with so much authority. You're
Mhm.
just like, uh-huh, yeah, this is just going great. And that, and then like for fretless stuff, I would say, like, which really kind of broke into what I would, some of my solo things would be like Michael Manring. And it's another thing too. It's like he does all this crazy, stuff that's just creating all these kind of like textures, atmospheres. He approaches his bass much like an orchestra, but then you listen to him play as a sideman, and it's still like you can still tell it's him, but it's like he's holding it down just so tastefully. And you're like, wow, you can have both these things. You don't have to be this killer soloist and then you can't hold down the rhythm part because you're still doing that thing. You can,
Yeah, no, 100%. And I would even argue that the timekeeping aspect is honestly the more important of the two, really, because
Mhm.
that's like shifting away from bass and into drummers. I mean, it always blew my mind when people would bag on people like Ringo or Charlie Watts. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? Those
Right.
bands wouldn't be as cohesive as they were without those guys. You
Right,
know,
right. You need
yeah,
the metronome. Everyone's like saying, "Oh, you don't have to practice with the metronome." It's like, yeah, you do, because when you're playing live, you're technically playing with one as with a drummer.
yeah. No,
You know?
100%. Yeah. And also too, back to what you said. I mean, you said this in a couple places, but the jazz guys, I know what you're talking about. Where like the bass players will be playing their walking line or whatever, but then they solo and it's like "Da-da-da-da-da," and they do all this crazy stuff, and then it's like literally drops right back into it.
Yep.
That to me is like on a sonic level, that's like a roller coaster for me, where it's like you have that drop back into them into the line. I just always loved. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I just always loved that about, particularly when bass is solo in the jazz tunes, because it is like that. Just when you drop back into that groove, it's so satisfying.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that's the thing too, is I think a lot of people forget is that when you're soloing, you're still supposed to be telling them a story,
Yes.
you know? And you gotta give them something to remember. I sat in, or attended a master class with Esperanza Spalding
Mm.
years and years ago, when she was still just starting out. Um, and she said something that was very, it sounded cocky in the context, but it really wasn't, because she was sitting there at this at the university, the bands would play, the combos would play for her, and then she would give some critique, and she's talking about, okay, you did this good. You really need to do this to bump up moving into the second chorus, things like that. And she said something about that, is that, you really have to take people on a journey with that. You have to tell something with your playing. She's like, if not, I'll just go home, listen to records of people better than you. And it sounded cocky, but you're listening to it, it's like she's literally telling you, if all you've got to do is just tell a story, and you don't have to be, a very adept person on your instrument. People will listen to you the whole time, you know,
100%.
and I think, like, you think about like Albert Collins and BB King, guys
Mhm.
that could take a blues chorus with one note, and everybody would go insane. The guy's playing one note over this whole 12 bars, which, beginning, starting out, you're like, man, that sounds so boring and stuff. But then the more you learn and grow, you're like, dang, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, no, totally. And as you said that, yeah, my initial reaction when you said what she said was like, wow, that does sound cocky, but I don't think she's saying it like you said. It's meant more to like give some people the real insight, the key to like you don't have to be virtuosic to get to
Right.
people. In fact, it's almost probably better if you're not. You
Right.
know, you just got to tell that story. That's so huge.
Mhm.
Right on. So, what's the weirdest thing that's ever inspired you?
Um, the weirdest thing, man. I don't know, because I mean, I try to, you always try to find something that just interests you. Anyway, I would probably say, in college, I wrote kind of this Latin tune called "Exile." Really kind of cool, very like nice melodious melody. And the reason behind it was, I was just in college. My Spanish teacher from high school reached out, and because she knew I was an illustrator, mostly because I probably got caught drawing in her class instead of paying attention. But she was doing, um, their kids were doing kind of like a Hispanic coloring book for the younger kids, talking about prominent um, Hispanic actors, musicians, and things like that. And I did this for a couple of years. Like we did, uh, I did some pictures for uh, James Edward Olmos. We did one of Gloria Estefan, things like that. And I remember one time, they sent it down to the president of Mexico, and he was totally impressed with this project and what was happening and things. And so the idea of this song was the fact that I'm not sure what would happen, but I would do something stupid that would require me to leave the country. And I would be welcomed with open arms into Mexico because I drew these coloring books, you
Oh,
know
wow.
so the A section of this Latin tune is very somber like that, but then the B section opens up into this glorious like kind of flowing melody thing, and that's kind of the like I made it there, and the president's like at the airport welcoming me with open arms. So I would say that's probably the weirdest.
That's awesome. Wow. And yeah, that is definitely very different. I love that.
Hmm.
How has your art influenced other people?
I think the biggest thing that I there's a couple of things I like. I mean, first, I like, when playing with a band, I like somebody saying the band sounded great over you sounded great, because I think, that's my job. I'm not there just to show off. My stuff that I'm playing is supposed to help everybody else. And especially with the punk band, it's been a very interesting thing because that's not my bag usually. So this past year has been learning a lot about, okay, what can I get away with? And I mean, you know punk stuff too, there's a lot of very virtuosic players that I think a lot of us pass over because of the genre. you know and
Yeah.
they're all just monsters, but the thing is too is they're doing the same thing. And so I mean, that's the one side. The other side is with the solo things, is it really is cool to hear somebody actually say, I never knew you could do that. Something, or even just like, man, that's just, it was just so pretty, because somebody usually thinks of taking a bass solo, somebody's just gonna just give you these walls of notes, huge things going back and forth. And it's like, no, you can play these very beautiful, lush melodies, and you can play these really neat chords underneath. And people are like, wow, yeah, that's great. And it almost has more power over what you're doing instead of just hitting everybody with all these notes.
Right. Totally 100%. And I mean, it's, God, I forgot who it was, but there was an artist very famous that made reference to, the notes you don't play being more important than the ones you do and like leaving
Right.
space for things to breathe and everything.
Right. Right. That was I did that when I covered the Soundgarden tune Blow Up the Outside World, because I mean, that itself, huge band, what hugely known for their just soundscapes and things like that. And it's like, and to take it down to a solo bass thing, it's like it's very much, okay, what do I want to do? It's like you're trying to pull apart, okay, this isn't needed, this isn't needed, this isn't needed. But then you get it down to the thing of almost to the point of, if I take anything more away from this song, it's gonna fall apart,
Yeah, right.
you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah. What an interesting challenge though to have to do that with solo. That's why I'm so blown away by your stuff because your arrangements. I mean, I mostly listened to your solo stuff when I was, researching and
Mhm.
that's mostly what I've gravitated toward your stuff and just the way you arrange bass and make it sound so full and it's but minimalist at the same time. So it's like you're not doing any more than you need to and just enough, like you said before, to tell the story. And it really is incredible. Like that's a gift to be able to do that with a bass, particularly. That's
Oh, thank you.
not something I've come across often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it really still comes back from the jazz and classical background because especially in jazz, you can take, if you're playing, one chord over, okay, yeah, the bass player can outline that chord, or you could play something other than that, which turns that chord upside down.
That's right.
It was a lot of stuff like that where my private lesson instructors, we would talk about voice leading, and it would be that thing of, okay, you have, I want you to write out three choruses of this jazz chart, taking a solo. I want you to use as few chord changes as possible. What can you play over like this first half? Instead of moving along with every chord that's with it, what what are the notes that you can keep here that will change? And so I think a lot of that just kind of ingrained to be like, okay, we're moving. So when I'm writing stuff, I'm like, okay, I can keep this going, but then move this in the back to give it some nice motion while still keeping the top melody right where I need it.
Totally, man. And what a great lesson, man. You're whoever your professor is, whoever your teacher is. I love
Ha!
this guy, and that's certainly paid off in spades in your music for sure.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you have any pre-show or pre-studio rituals?
Um, Not really. I mean, the biggest one is, when you're going in to at least like a studio, I try to have the thing down cold because, it's time, it's money, whether you're fronting it or somebody else is putting it up. It's, you want to make sure that you can get it done as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I mean, just being over prepared is a good one for like a gig or something, not so much. I don't really have any. I mean, I usually just go over my equipment real quick to make sure I've got everything I need because I've had so many, I've had enough stupid things like everybody else. Like I had one time I showed up to a musical theater gig and I didn't have an instrument cable.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, like total rookie 101 mistake.
Right.
I went over to the sound person and they laughed hard. And then they gave me an instrument cable and stuff. So but yeah, I mean, it's more of that, just kind of making everything is good. And I mean, at the same point, um, the usual health kind of stuff. Make sure you're fed. Make sure you've got plenty of water or whatever. Just because I mean, first and foremost, we're there to put on a show. You
Yes.
know, over anything else. Whether I'm playing in a cover band, whether I'm playing musical theater, or playing with the Quirk, we're there to put on a show for those people, and they came to see it. And it doesn't matter whether I'm playing this song, the you know this is my third time playing it, or it's my 300th. Somebody out there, it's their first time seeing it live, and they deserve to hear it the best.
That's a really great viewpoint. I actually love that you said that. And I guess I've instinctively always kind of had that viewpoint, but I've never really actually cognizantly thought about that. And that's so true, and just for keeping it fresh for you as an artist, I guess that's a great piece of advice, is really keeping that in mind. Cause, I mean, especially if you're on a show that's been the same thing for several dates and things, it can start to feel stale, but just keep in mind that it's always somebody else's first time that you're giving them, and that's really
Right. Right. And I think at least with the Cork, we've got a little bit more leeway because I mean, our main set's 7 songs, half hour, which we always joke about when someone's like, "Oh, we'll give you a 45-minute set." We laugh. We're like, "Well, we're not going to take that long."
good.
But we have enough stuff going on that it's always fun to make sure, what can we do to lock in with people and stuff, whether that's, me playing something that locks in with the drummer, if that's something that locks in more with our lead guitarist, because he tends to do a lot more. It's almost like it's a four piece, but the function of the group is more of like a trio with a guitarist that adds a lot more of ambient textures and almost shoegaze stuff on top. And it's really neat in that regards because we do have a couple of songs that open up for solos, and that's really where it may be the 500th time we've played this song, but it's always going to be different because Pat's going to do something different. And I don't have to tell you, he's going to step on a different pedal this time because he's like, oh, I want to try this one out. And suddenly it's like, oh man, we're all inspired because I don't know what sound that is, but that's great. And we're going to work with it and things. So
That's so awesome. Yeah, and so this keeping it fresh that way is so awesome. That's That's what I love about jazz too, and just the improvisational jazz. Same thing. You take the same song, but every time you play it with whatever group of guys, it's always going to sound a little different. It's a constantly just evolving thing. That's so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, what risks, if any, have you personally taken for the sake of your music?
I mean, I think venturing out as a solo bassist is a pretty big one.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that.
Yeah. I think a lot of times is me taking a gig without really knowing what the genre is. I've done that a couple of times. Like I had one time somebody um I played a local church in town, and it's not a real Bible thumping kind of thing. And so because of that, like there's a lot of different genres that get played there all the time. And we have different musicians that roll through. And we had this one from I think Asheville that invited me to sit in at a yoga studio with them later that evening for a kirtan. And I'm sitting there being like, yeah, that's great. Awesome. In the back of my head, I was like, I have no idea what this is. And so I go and so I start, you know, doing some research on it and things. And it's still one of those like, I'm not that comfortable with it, but I am going to walk into this, as the student and just I'm going to start it here. And a couple of the songs I'd already played earlier that day with her at the church gig. So that was all right. And then we she just kind of explained how it goes, and I'm like, okay, cool. And I ended up like for the next couple of years, every time she'd roll through town, like immediate text, she's like, hey, are you around next Sunday for this? We're going to do so. And it turned into a really kind of cool thing.
Right on. And I love that you put it as approaching it as you were the student. I think that's another good point for artists to remember is, there's always something else to learn, something else to explore. And sometimes you really do have to be the student and not, you know,
Yeah,
the
yeah. And
that's important.
well, I mean, especially in the Quirk, I probably walked into that band being the most experienced out of the four of them, and I came in to fill the role because originally my wife got the gig as the bass player for it. And then last spring, their drummer left for spend more time with family, and so they kind of they knew that Jen's main instrument was drums, so they said, "Hey, why don't you jump over to drums and we can figure out bass at a later time?" And she's like, "Actually, I might, hold on, let me talk to John, see what he could do." So I'm walking in there with, if we're talking about technical experience, probably well more than all of them combined. But they've been playing this stuff more than I have. So
Right.
really, at the end of the day, it's really more on me to learn their style and things. And at that point too, maybe by me playing and being able to be more adept at some of this stuff, it helps them be better musicians as well. So I mean, it really turns into more of a give and take kind of deal.
Yes, exactly, and that's another great point of like, and I feel like these days too, like, some people get so dialed into like the competitive vibe, even within a band. It's like,
Right.
the classic example of the guitarist that always has to be a little louder than everyone, or, I mean, I've seen ego trip things happen in all sorts of different atmospheres and bands, but it really should be a give and take, and it's a live dialogue with the band, and it's a camaraderie thing, and it's a team sport. It's not compete with each other. That's such a great example of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing too, we always forget, especially on stuff like that, is when something's missing, we always try to turn up or, play more kind of things like that. And a lot of times too, and maybe this comes from me being a graphic designer background, but it's almost more powerful to cut stuff instead of boosting everything.
Yes. Yeah, no, 100%. And again, that's a fantastic point. It's not, yeah, more is not always more.
Right. Yeah. It's that thing of like a bass player wanting to get a better slap sound. So they boost the treble and the bass. It's like, okay, but if you're really thinking about what you did, you cut the mids. It's all you
Yeah,
did, but you made your signal louder and now it's harder to actually control. Whereas if you would have just kept, the treble and bass at the same spot, but scooped the mids a little bit, same outcome, but now
right.
it's at a more manageable level. So you get a better audio signal going to wherever it's supposed to.
Exactly. And more cohesive with the whole group.
Right.
Absolutely. Yes. So, what's the craziest risk you've ever seen another artist take for their craft?
Craziest risk, another person. Man, I don't know. Cause I mean, there's so many. um, I think a lot of times it's seeing people taking a risk is like trying to really double down on like something, especially if they are like if they said something online and then without be and somebody might bring up the point that okay, maybe they were wrong on something is then just sitting there being like, no, I'm absolutely right. And it's like doubling down on something isn't really a good look sometimes, especially if it's one of those it's like, look, especially nowadays, being able to say I was wrong or hey, I learned something today is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's, that especially as a parent, that's one of the things I have to show my kids, and there's been times like that where I would do something with them and say, "Hey, I behaved badly and I acted wrong in this regard." And they're like, "Well, that's okay." I was like, "It's not okay. This is how we have to talk about this," kind of
Yeah.
thing. So, I mean, I would say that these, especially when they get to a certain, when artists get to a certain level, or anybody really, when they think that things don't apply to them or that they're a little more Teflon than everybody else,
Hmm.
and
That's
it's
a
like,
good point. Yeah.
yeah, because the fans got you there in the first place,
Yeah.
and they're the ones that ultimately keep you there or let you go.
Correct. Yeah, and I mean, even above that, it's like no matter how big you ever get, we're all still human beings, and we all are still
Exactly.
here on planet Earth playing by the same rules.
Right.
Totally. So, what's one thing about you that would shock everyone to know?
What's one thing that would man, I mean, I don't know, because I mean, most of my stuff they're pretty, because I'm a pretty big comic book geek. A lot of people, that's not a big shock or a big stretch over kind of thing. You know, uh, it might be one of those things too that I really like hanging out in my garage working on motorcycles because most people wouldn't think that, and that's like I mean, and that's a newer thing. I blame that on my wife because she found this really killer Elvira themed Vespa.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, so we grabbed that and then, that started the thing off and now we have like, two Hondas and a Super Cub and the Vespa in the garage. And so
Wow,
yeah, and so it is one of those things. It's like anything that needs to get done, it's just like, no, I'm going to take care of it myself.
that's cool. And yeah, that is. You're right. I would not have pegged you as a motorcycle guy, but that's awesome.
Yeah, I actually this summer too cuz it's about a 60-mile round trip when I go to the office
Hmm.
from the house. And I took the Super Cub there on the days I could, and it turned out to be like that's 1,600 miles I put on that bike that I didn't put on my car.
Fair point. It is definitely cheaper to run a bike than it is to run a car. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So,
100%. Right on. And so now, what's the one thing or the one tool you absolutely cannot live without as an artist, and why?
man, I would say one tool I can't. I mean, the instrument itself, notwithstanding.
Sure.
Uh, I mean, I would say something like I would put Eventide as a whole because
Oh,
their stuff has been like so awesome. It's like I've had an H9 for years. And just all the kind of the thing it's like giving a budding illustrator giving him a full set of Copic markers, you know the whole thing, all the shades and stuff. So and
yeah.
you're sitting there being like, great, what am I going to make with this? And that's where a lot of some of the songs even got inspired by, because you're playing around with different effects and it turns into something cool and you're like, all right, sweet, that's how I'm doing this song now. And stuff like that. Now with I'm one of the I was very fortunate and got one of the pre-release H90s that
Ooh.
came out. Yeah, so I've been, it's been awesome because I've been writing some reviews for it for Bass Musician Magazine, but I've been kind of taking my whole board and being like, okay, sweet, how do I bring this down into a little board, and doing the same thing and kind of figuring stuff out. And then also, it's just there's so much stuff to still learn. And I mean, some people will look at it and be like, man, it's very intimidating. And it can be, I understand it because like there's so much stuff, but it's like, if you just start with one thing, it's kind of going back to the marker thing. Man, there's so many colors. All right, well, let's just start with red, you know?
Right. Right.
Do that. See, look at all the various hues you've got. Look at all those. Oh, sweet. Well, what happens if you throw a little blue in there? Oh, look at, now you start making some purples. Okay, cool. And that's
Mhm.
when you can start saying, hey, I like this shade that I'm creating here, and it's that same thing with creating. Um, especially working on bass sounds for the Quirk because I've been trying to do, okay, what's a really cool sound that I can get out of this? And I've been running, it allows me to run effects parallel, which has been like, a huge mind blowing thing for me because we're always very much of you know, the distortion goes into the modulation, which goes into this. And now it's like, no, the distortion and the chorus pedal run at the same time. So I can get a huge, so
Cool.
yeah. And it's starting to be like, okay, I'm going to run a really heavy distortion because the chorus is going to be the clean part on the top that sits on top of it,
Yeah.
you know,
So you get all your articulation from that and everything. Yeah.
right, and it's been really cool, and then, like, because you can start putting stuff into, like, effects loops and things, and it gives you a blend function on that, so, like, I'm using a low super fuzz for, a lot of my tone and some of the really big stuff, which, bass and fuzz is awesome.
Yes.
You know, and then I even run a tube preamp after that, so it's like just huge, huge beefy thing. But on a couple other things, I set that effect loop that fuzz is in to like 25%. So when I click it on, it's more of just a boost pedal instead of the whole thing. And it's going back, it's figuring out what colors work well, how they play against each other, which I mean, at least for me, I think's the coolest part about having it.
Yeah, totally. And I love what you said too about like, you if you try to jump all into something like that, you're gonna fall on your face. It's just gonna happen because there's so much. But taking it on a gradient level and just one thing at a time, start small, build on top of the basic stuff. Such a smart approach. And yeah, then if you do that, you have the whole box of crayons at your disposal eventually, and it doesn't even have to take that long.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. So, what has been the most difficult piece of music for you to create and why?
Oh man. Uh I would say I think it's the song Mean Streak, and it's one of my earlier tunes. And it's just because it is so technically complex and it's demanding. And it came about because I was doing uh, a show at in Akron called theLohio Bass Fest, put on by Jared Lees a couple years back. And I rolled through Sandusky, Ohio on the way there. And for those who don't know, Sandusky is home to Cedar Point Amusement Park.
Yes, it is.
And those that don't know is that yours truly played in the live band for 2 summers, during college.
Oh, I did
S
not know that.
Exactly, so while people were going back home and doing whatever work they could, grocery store or whatever, I was playing 6 shows a day, 6 days a week there. And so, I was kind of had this idea of, I was gonna start writing a song just kind of as a nod to my time there. And it was like, as I'm doing that and I'm eating at the local dive bar there that, it is a locals only place.
Mhm.
Cause like I even came in and when I ordered a burger, the lady's like, "You're not from around here, but you found this place." And I was like, "I used to work at Cedar Point." She's like, "That's it." You know? So and but then I saw a news article like the next day or so saying that the Mean Streak, which was like their at the time when it was done, the largest wooden roller coaster in the U.S., uh,
Mhm.
was being retired,
Oh,
kind of thing. And so I'm like, okay, instead of writing a song for that, I'm going to write it for this, the roller coaster. So I'm trying, and so trying to figure out, okay, what are the things I can do to make it sound like this roller coaster, and working on things like that. And also kind of the vibe too was, it's a wooden roller coaster. It's rough. If people have been on those, it's not a smooth ride. You get beaten up a little bit. So it's kind of some of that too, is like I was pushing myself on a lot of these techniques, like the one part in the bridge and like doing these triplet slaps and like they're precise. They have to be right on, and I remember when I recorded that at the studio, we also paid to have a guy for 2 hours just take video,
yeah.
just so we could have some reels of stuff. And one of my favorite ones is when I went back in to overdub that, just kind of get it a little cleaner. We've got a video shot of him uh, over the shoulder of the sound guy, in front of the board. I'm in the window and stuff, going through that part, and you hear the sound guy go, "That's hard." And So
That's
I
awesome.
would say that because it is definitely one of those songs. It's like I still play it every now and but I almost use it as my warm up because if I can play that, I can play anything.
Totally. That's swinging the loaded bat before you step up the plate, right?
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. If you were going to write a book about your career up to this point, what would you title it?
Um, see, I always joke that I would call it sweet merciful crap, kind of from the Homer Simpson thing. But I think I would probably start it with I would call it I think tell me no again
Right on.
because so many things that I've done were really kind of because they said I couldn't do it. So it's like okay, sweet. You know, I I auditioned to get into the School of Music at Western Michigan University. I didn't get it. All right, well, I started gigging more than most of the people there. You know,
Oh,
and it was one of those. My first graphic design job was from a thing saying, "Well, you didn't get into the graphic design program, so you're not ready for this." I walked in and I beat out people that actually had a degree in it.
wow.
So
Boy, so yeah, let that be a lesson. Just because one person says no doesn't mean you can't. It's a decision.
right, right. And if anything, it should be like, hey, somebody says no, cool, on to the next person. You know,
That's right. Yeah, well, that's even like a thing in sales. Like every no is one less no that you get through on your way to the next, on the way to the yes, you know? And so,
yeah, exactly,
yeah. And if you're driven to do something, you can do it.
right, right, exactly.
So great. So, what are your plans for world domination?
Well, I mean, music wise, the Quirk has a couple singles coming out this year that we're pretty proud of. Um, one of them is an old tune that we've played a while, and another one's a really new one that is cool because that's the new one is very more put together while Jen and I were in the band. So it's much more a modern thing, even though the other one's still a great tune too. I'm more excited about that one just because we had more input.
Hmm.
Those are coming out. Um, we're gonna swing for the fences, and I think we're gonna look to try to get a 45 with both of
Ooh,
them. Yeah, right. And that's
that's
one of
cool.
yeah, and that's one of the singers like bucket list things. And I'm like, I think we can do it. It's just can we find a place that can do it in within a year, um, and stuff like that. So there's that. In terms of my other stuff, just kind of right now, it's kind of because I've been doing so much stuff with the Quirk and doing some more freestyle, freelancing stuff. The solo things kind of taken a little backseat, which is okay because after I finished that last album, you kind of sit back after a while. You're like, I don't have a lot to say, musically speaking on that right now. I kind of
Yeah,
said what I wanted to here. I'm just going to let that, marinate for a bit.
yeah, totally. Just live some more life and see what else inspires you, and then you'll when it's time, it's time.
Right. Exactly.
Totally. Awesome. And then I have one more question for you. And just to revisit the introduction to this podcast. So, again, the podcast, it's not only to showcase the best of independent artists, but also explore what inspires them, what drives them, and what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. So, John, what's your truth?
I mean, honestly, it's kind of that. It's interesting because we watched a documentary just before this on Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama,
Wow.
and it really came down to that. Is like me playing music. Um, I mean, it brings me a lot of joy. It's one of those you can joke and be like, it's the one thing that I ever felt I was good at, even though I know I'm great at a lot of things. It's like this is the one that I really, it always felt like home to play. So I mean, if I can impart that kind of joy from my playing onto what people when they're listening to the people that we're playing with and things, that's kind of a big deal, you know. And I would say that's really to impart something onto somebody that way, some sort of emotion that they take away saying, "Wow, that was really cool."
Awesome. That's so awesome, man. What a great purpose. And what a great way to end up this interview. Thank you so much for being here. My goodness.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Before we do end off, I did want to give you 60 seconds, just, plug anything you'd like to plug, everything John Moody, go.
Yeah, I mean, to keep on track with anything, whether it's the Quirk, whether it's my solo stuff, head over to justmoody.com.
Mhm.
You can see videos there of my solo stuff, of anything that I've done together with other people. Um, And that's the easiest way to find me. Social media tags are all there too. So yeah, please reach out, say hi, share a story, whatever.
Awesome. Cool. Well, again, John, thank you so much. And to everyone watching, this has been the What's Your Truth podcast. We'll see you on the next one. Later.
Yeah, you follow your own rules and you preach them on to me. But you don't think before you act, and you ain't got no business with me. You don't know. But tell me what's your truth? Oh, what's your truth?